The morning of March 15th started like any other Tuesday at Kensington Palace. Kate Middleton woke up at 7:30, her usual time, and immediately checked on the children before heading to the kitchen for breakfast. Prince Louis was already awake in his crib, babbling happily to his stuffed animals. The sight of her youngest son always brought a smile to Kate's face, no matter how tired she felt. William had left early for a charity engagement in Birmingham, or so Kate thought. She had kissed him goodbye at 6 in the morning, noticing he seemed distracted and checking his phone more than usual. When she asked if everything was okay, he simply said he was worried about his speech for the mental health conference later that week. The palace staff were going about their morning routines when Kate settled into the sunny breakfast room with Louis. Princess Charlotte was still getting dressed upstairs with her nanny, while Prince George was in the bathroom brushing his teeth. These quiet morning moments were precious to Kate. Small pockets of normal family life away from the constant scrutiny of royal duties. At exactly 9:43 in the morning, William's private phone began ringing in his study. Kate could hear it clearly from the breakfast room, but she didn't think much of it. Royal phones rang constantly with official business, family matters, and staff communications. She continued feeding Louis his porridge while listening to Charlotte's animated chatter about her upcoming ballet recital. The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. This pattern repeated 3 more times before Kate began to feel concerned. William always answered his phone, especially his private line that only family members and close staff had access to. She wondered if he had forgotten it at home in his rush to leave for Birmingham. Mary, the long-time palace housekeeper, knocked gently on the breakfast room door. "Your Royal Highness," she said quietly. "Prince William's private phone has been ringing non-stop. Should I answer it?" Kate considered this for a moment. William's private phone was exactly that, private. She had never answered it before, and she respected his privacy completely. But something about the persistent calling made her feel uneasy. "Let me check if you forgot it," Kate said, handing Louis to his nanny and walking toward William's study. That she approached the oak-paneled room that William used for private calls and paperwork. She could hear the phone ringing again. When she pushed open the heavy door, she saw William's phone sitting on his mahogany desk, the screen lighting up with an incoming call. The caller ID showed a name Kate didn't recognize, Sarah M. Kate stared at the phone, feeling a strange flutter of anxiety in her stomach. William knew many people through his charity work and military connections, but he usually mentioned the important people in his life. She couldn't recall him ever talking about anyone named Sarah. The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. Same name, same number. Against her better judgment, Kate picked up the phone. "Hello," she answered cautiously. "William," came a woman's voice, sounding surprised and slightly panicked. "I need to talk to you. It's urgent. It's about what we discussed last night." Kate felt her heart skip a beat. "This is Catherine. William isn't available right now. Can I take a message?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Kate could hear the woman breathing, clearly trying to decide what to say. "Catherine," the woman finally said, her voice much softer now. "I'm Sarah. I think William may have mentioned me." "No," Kate replied honestly. "He hasn't." Another silence, longer this time. Kate could feel her hands beginning to shake slightly. Something was very wrong with this conversation. "I see," Sarah said quietly. "Well, perhaps it's better that I speak with you directly. We need to meet. There are things you need to know about your husband." Kate's mouth went dry. "What kind of things?" "Not over the phone," Sarah replied quickly. "Can you meet me today, this afternoon? It's important, Catherine, more important than you realize." Kate found herself agreeing to meet this mysterious woman, though every instinct told her she was making a terrible mistake. They arranged to meet at a small cafe in Notting Hill at 2 o'clock. Sarah said she would be wearing a blue coat and carrying a brown leather handbag. After hanging up, Kate sat in William's chair, staring at the phone in her hands. Who was this woman? Why did she sound so familiar with William's schedule? And, most disturbing of all, why hadn't William ever mentioned her? Kate tried calling William's official phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried his security detail, but they said he was in meetings and couldn't be disturbed. The morning suddenly felt different, charged with an anxiety Kate couldn't shake. She spent the next few hours trying to act normal around the children and staff, but Mary noticed immediately that something was wrong. "Your Royal Highness," Mary said quietly while they were arranging flowers in the main hallway, "is everything all right? You seem troubled." Kate had known Mary for 10 years. The older woman had been like a mother figure to her during the difficult early years of royal life. If anyone would notice changes in her mood, it would be Mary. "I'm not sure," Kate admitted. "Someone called for William this morning, a woman named Sarah. She wants to meet with me about something important." Mary's face changed instantly. She set down the vase she was holding and looked directly at Kate with an expression of deep concern. "Sarah," Mary repeated quietly. "Did she give a last name?" "Just Sarah M. Do you know who she is?" Mary hesitated, clearly struggling with whether to speak. Finally, she took Kate's arm gently and led her to a private alcove. "Your Royal Highness," Mary said carefully, "I've seen that name on Prince William's calendar several times over the past 2 years. Private appointments, usually listed as SM personal matter. I always assumed it was related to his therapy or mental health work. Kate felt her legs go weak. William had been seeing someone named Sarah for 2 years, and she had never heard of her. Private appointments that weren't on his official schedule. Mary, Kate said quietly, has William seemed different to you lately? Distant or preoccupied? Mary nodded sadly. Yes, Your Royal Highness. For several months now. I thought perhaps it was the pressure of his duties, or stress about the children's schooling. But now that you mention this phone call, Kate realized that the morning's strange phone call was just the beginning of what would become the worst day of her life. As she prepared to meet this mysterious Sarah, she had no idea that everything she believed about her marriage, her husband, and her future was about to crumble completely. The drive to Notting Hill would be the last time Kate Middleton would ever feel like the secure, trusting wife she had always been. By the time she returned to Kensington Palace that evening, would be a completely different woman. Kate drove back to Kensington Palace in complete silence, her mind reeling from everything Sarah had revealed. The photographs on the passenger seat seemed to burn into her consciousness. Images of her husband living a completely different life with another woman, a woman who was now carrying his child. When she arrived at the palace, Kate sat in her car for several minutes trying to compose herself before facing the children and staff. She looked at herself in the rearview mirror and was shocked by her appearance. Her face was pale, her eyes were bloodshot from crying, and her hands were still shaking uncontrollably. Mary was waiting in the entrance hall when Kate walked through the doors. The older woman took one look at Kate's face and immediately knew that her worst fears had been confirmed. Your Royal Highness, Mary said quietly, the children are having their afternoon snack in the kitchen. Would you like me to tell them you're not feeling well? Kate nodded gratefully. She wasn't ready to see George, Charlotte, and Louis while her world was crumbling around her. She needed time to think, to plan, and most importantly, to decide how to handle the confrontation with William that was now inevitable. Kate said quietly, when is William expected back from Birmingham? His official schedule shows he should return by 5 o'clock. Mary replied. But Your Royal Highness, I should tell you that Prince William called about an hour ago. He said his meetings were cancelled and he would be returning early. Kate felt her heart skip. William was coming home early on the same day that Sarah had tried to reach him urgently. Was this a coincidence, or had he somehow learned about their meeting? Did he say why his meetings were cancelled? Kate asked. No, Your Royal Highness. He just said he needed to return to the palace immediately for a family matter. Kate realized that William must have seen the missed calls from Sarah and was now panicking about what might have happened. He probably had no idea that his wife had met with his mistress and learned everything about their 2-year affair. Kate went upstairs to her private sitting room and spread Sarah's photographs across her writing desk. She studied each image, looking for clues about when and where they had been taken. In the background of one photo, she could see a street sign that indicated they were near Hyde Park. Another showed them outside what appeared to be an expensive apartment building in Chelsea. As she examined the pictures more closely, Kate began to notice details that made the betrayal even more painful. In the photo of William and Sarah walking hand in hand, William was wearing a watch Kate had given him for their 5th wedding anniversary. In the kissing photo, Sarah was wearing a necklace that looked remarkably similar to one William had claimed to have lost during a charity polo match. Kate heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly gathered the photographs, slipping them into her handbag. She didn't want the children to accidentally see these images that would be impossible to explain at exactly for 15. Kate heard William's voice in the entrance hall speaking with his security detail. His tone sounded tense and urgent, very different from his usual calm demeanor when returning from official engagements. Kate positioned herself in the main drawing room, sitting in the same chair she had used for their engagement photos 10 years earlier. The irony of the location wasn't lost on her. This was where their public fairy tale had begun, and now it would be where their private truth was finally revealed. William appeared in the doorway, still wearing his formal suit from the charity engagement. His hair was disheveled, and Kate could see stress lines around his eyes that she hadn't noticed that morning. Kate, he said, walking toward her with obvious relief. I got several missed calls from an unknown number today. My security team was concerned it might be a threat of some kind. Did anyone try to contact the palace? Kate looked at her husband, this man she had loved and trusted completely for over a decade, and felt a surge of anger unlike anything she had ever experienced. He was still lying to her, even now, even when he must have suspected that his secret was about to be exposed. Yes, Kate said calmly. Someone did contact the palace. A woman named Sarah Mitchell. She said she needed to speak with you urgently, about something you discussed last night. William's face went completely white. He stopped walking and stood frozen in the middle of the room, clearly trying to decide how much Kate might know. Sarah called here, he asked carefully. She called your private phone. Multiple times. When you didn't answer, I eventually picked up. William sat down heavily in the chair across from Kate, his head falling into his hands. Kate, I can explain. Can you? Kate asked, her voice still eerily calm, because Sarah already explained quite thoroughly. We had a very interesting conversation over tea this afternoon. William looked up sharply, his eyes wide with panic. You met with her. She showed me photographs, William, very detailed photographs of your relationship over the past 2 years. Kate reached into her handbag and pulled out the pictures, placing them one by one on the coffee table between them. With each photograph, William seemed to shrink further into his chair. 2 years, Kate continued. For 2 years, you've been living a double life. While I was taking care of our children, supporting your charitable work, and carrying out my royal duties, you were building a completely different life with another woman. William stared at the photographs without speaking. Kate could see tears forming in his eyes, but she felt no sympathy for him. Her own capacity for compassion had been exhausted during the long drive home from Notting Hill. Kate, please let me explain how this happened. William finally said. Oh, I think I understand perfectly how it happened, Kate replied. You were getting counseling for your emotional issues, and you developed feelings for your therapist. The professional relationship became personal, and eventually became romantic. It's actually quite predictable, William. The only surprising thing is how long you managed to keep it secret. It wasn't supposed to happen, William said desperately. I went to Sarah for help with my anxiety and depression. I was struggling so much with the pressure of royal life, and I felt like I couldn't talk to anyone about it without risking public exposure. So you decided to risk our marriage instead. William had no answer for that question. He picked up one of the photographs, the one showing him and Sarah kissing, and stared at it with an expression Kate couldn't interpret. Do you love her? Kate asked directly. The question hung in the air for a long moment. Kate could see William struggling with whether to lie or tell the truth. Finally, he nodded silently. Say it, Kate demanded. If you're going to destroy our marriage, at least have the courage to be honest about it. Yes, William said quietly. I love her more than you love me. This question was harder for William to answer. Kate could see him wrestling with emotions he had clearly been suppressing. For years, I love you both, he said finally, but in different ways. Sarah understands parts of me that I've never been able to share with anyone else. She knows about my struggles with anxiety, with the pressure of being heir to the throne, with the constant fear that I'm not good enough for this role. I'm your wife, Kate said, her voice breaking for the first time. I should have been the person you shared those struggles with. You're also the future queen, William replied. You have your own pressures, your own duties. I didn't want to burden you with my personal problems when you were dealing with so much already. Kate realized that William had been protecting her from his emotional struggles, but in doing so, he had created distance between them that another woman had been able to fill. The tragedy was that Kate would have gladly helped him carry his emotional burdens if he had trusted her enough to share them. There's something else, Kate said quietly. Sarah is pregnant. William's face went completely white again. He stared at Kate in shock, clearly hearing this news for the first time. She wanted to tell me before she told you, Kate continued. She thought I deserved to know what choice you would be facing. William buried his face in his hands again, his shoulders shaking with sobs. Kate watched her husband fall apart emotionally, and for the first time since learning about the affair, she felt a flicker of sympathy for him. What happens now? William asked through his tears. Kate looked at the photographs scattered on the coffee table, then at her husband who was crying like a broken child, and realized that their marriage as she had known it was already over. The only question now was how to handle the aftermath with as much dignity as possible. Kate arrived at the small cafe in Notting Hill 15 minutes early, her hands trembling as she ordered a cup of tea she knew she wouldn't be able to drink. She had chosen a corner table where she could see the entrance. Wearing dark sunglasses and a simple black coat to avoid recognition, the last thing she needed was photographers capturing whatever was about to unfold. At exactly 2 o'clock, a woman in a blue coat walked through the cafe door, scanning the room nervously. She was beautiful in an understated way, with blonde hair and kind eyes that reminded Kate painfully of William's own gentle expression. The woman spotted Kate immediately and walked over with hesitant steps. Catherine, she asked quietly, extending her hand. I'm Sarah Mitchell. Kate shook her hand, noticing immediately that Sarah's fingers were trembling just as much as her own. Whatever this woman had to say was clearly causing her tremendous anxiety as well. Thank you for meeting me, Sarah said, sitting down across from Kate. I know this must seem very strange, and I want you to know that I never wanted it to come to this. Kate studied Sarah's face, looking for clues about who this woman was and why she seemed so nervous. You said there were things I needed to know about William. What did you mean? Sarah took a deep breath, clearly struggling with where to begin. We've known each other for 3 years. We met at a charity event for military families. I'm a counselor who works with veterans dealing with trauma and PTSD. This information should have been reassuring, but something in Sarah's tone suggested there was much more to the story. William told me he was getting professional help, Kate said carefully, but he said it was through the official royal medical team. That's not entirely true, Sarah replied, looking down at her hands. He did seek official help initially, but he felt constrained by the formal protocols. He was worried about confidentiality and the possibility that details of his sessions, it might somehow become public knowledge. Kate felt her first flutter of real concern. William had been getting private counseling without telling her. And more importantly, why did this woman seem so personally invested in William's treatment? So you became his private therapist? Kate asked. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. It started that way. William was struggling so much with his mother's death, with the pressure of his royal duties, and with some personal issues he felt he couldn't discuss with anyone else. What kind of personal issues? The question hung in the air between them. Sarah reached into her brown leather handbag and pulled out several photographs, placing them face down on the table. Catherine, Sarah said quietly, I need you to understand that none of this was planned. What happened between William and me was never supposed to happen. We both tried to stop it multiple times. Kate's heart began pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. What happened between you? Instead of answering directly, Sarah turned over the first photograph. It showed William and Sarah sitting close together on a park bench, his arm around her shoulders. They both looked relaxed and happy in a way that Kate immediately recognized as intimate. This was taken 8 months ago, Sarah said quietly. William had been coming to see me for counseling sessions for over a year by then. Somewhere along the way, our professional relationship became something else. Kate stared at the photograph, feeling like she was looking at strangers. The William in the picture looked carefree and genuinely happy, more relaxed than she had seen him in years. But he was looking at another woman with the same expression he used to give Kate during their early dating years. Show me the rest, Kate said, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah turned over the second photograph. This one showed William and Sarah walking hand in hand along the Thames, both wearing casual clothes Kate didn't recognize. William was laughing at something Sarah had said, his face bright with joy. The third photograph was the most devastating. It showed William and Sarah kissing on the steps of what appeared to be a private apartment building. The kiss was not casual or friendly. It was the kiss of two people deeply in love. How long? Kate asked, echoing the same question she would ask William hours later. 2 years, Sarah admitted. The counseling relationship lasted about a year, before it became personal. We've been together romantically for 2 years. Kate felt like the cafe was spinning around her. 2 years. For 2 years her husband had been living a completely different life with another woman, while Kate had been raising their children and carrying out royal duties, believing she was in a happy marriage. Does he love you? Kate heard herself ask. Sarah's tears began flowing freely now. Yes, and I love him. But Catherine, that's not why I called you today. There's something else, something that changes everything. Kate couldn't imagine what could be worse than what she had already learned. But Sarah's expression suggested the worst was yet to come. I'm pregnant, Sarah said quietly. The baby is William's. The simple statement hit Kate like a physical blow. She felt all the air leave her lungs, and for a moment she thought she might faint right there in the cafe pregnant. William was going to have a baby with another woman. How far along? Kate managed to ask. 12 weeks. I found out a month ago, but I've been trying to decide what to do. William doesn't know yet. Kate stared at Sarah in disbelief. You haven't told him. I wanted to speak with you first. Catherine, I never intended for any of this to happen. I certainly never intended to break up your family or cause you pain. But this baby changes everything, and I felt you deserved to know the truth before William did. Kate appreciated the gesture, but she couldn't understand the logic behind it. Why tell me first? Why not talk to William? Sarah wiped her eyes with a tissue from her purse. Because I know William. He's been torn between his duty to his family and his feelings for me for 2 years. This pregnancy will force him to make a choice he's been avoiding. I thought you should know what that choice will be before he makes it. And what choice do you think he'll make? He'll choose you and the children, Sarah said without hesitation. He'll end our relationship and ask me to handle the pregnancy quietly. He'll sacrifice his own happiness to protect his family and the monarchy. Kate felt a bitter laugh escape her lips. That sounds like the William the First married, always doing the right thing, even when it destroys everything. But Catherine, Sarah continued, I don't think you should let him make that choice. I think you both deserve better than a marriage held together by duty and guilt. Kate looked at this woman who had been sharing her husband's love for 2 years and realized that Sarah understood William better than she did. Sarah knew that William would choose his family obligations over his personal happiness, just as he had been doing his entire life. What are you suggesting? Kate asked. I'm suggesting that you deserve a husband who chooses you because he can't imagine life without you, not because it's his royal duty. And William deserves to be with someone who makes him as happy as he is in these photographs. Kate looked again at the pictures of William and Sarah together. The man in these photographs looked genuinely joyful in a way that Kate suddenly realized she hadn't seen in years. When was the last time William had looked at her with that kind of uncomplicated happiness? Why are you doing this? Kate asked. If you love William, why are you essentially giving him up? Sarah smiled sadly. Because I do love him, and because I respect you. You've been living a lie for 2 years, and you deserve to know the truth so you can make your own choices about your future. Kate realized that this woman, who should have been her enemy, was actually showing her more honesty and respect than her own husband had in years. The irony was almost too painful to bear. As they prepared to leave the cafe, Sarah handed Kate a small piece of paper with her phone number. If you want to talk more, or if you have questions, Please call me. I know this is an impossible situation, but we don't have to handle it as enemies." Kate walked back to her car in a daze, knowing that her life had just changed completely, and there was no going back to the innocence of that morning's breakfast with Louis. The palace staff at Kensington had worked for the royal family long enough to recognize when something catastrophic was happening behind closed doors. Mary Thompson, the head housekeeper, had been with the household for 15 years and had never seen the Duchess of Cambridge look as devastated as she did when she returned from her afternoon meeting. James Crawford, William's private secretary, had been trying to reach the prince all day about urgent matters requiring his attention, when William suddenly cancelled his Birmingham engagement and rushed back to London without explanation. James knew something serious was developing. The first sign that the situation was spiraling out of control came when Mary heard raised voices from the main drawing room around 4:30 in the afternoon. In all her years of service, she had never heard Prince William raise his voice to his wife. The conversation seemed to go on for hours, with periods of shouting followed by long stretches of terrible silence. David Mitchell, the palace security chief, noticed that the Duchess had driven herself to an unknown location that afternoon without her usual protection detail. This was highly unusual and against established protocols. When he approached her about it later, Kate simply said she had needed some privacy for a personal meeting. The children's nanny, Maria Santos, became concerned when she heard Prince Louis crying upstairs around 5 o'clock. The little boy had apparently heard his parents' raised voices and was asking repeatedly where Mummy and Daddy were. Charlotte and George were also noticeably anxious, sensing the tension throughout the palace even though they couldn't understand what was causing it. Around 6 o'clock, Mary was arranging fresh flowers in the main hallway when she heard something that made her blood run cold. Through the partially open drawing room door, she heard the Duchess say very clearly, 2 years. William, for 2 years you've been lying to me every single day. Mary immediately understood that the mysterious phone calls and private appointments she had been wondering about for months were finally being exposed. She had suspected Prince William was having some kind of counseling or therapy, but she had never imagined it had become something more personal. James Crawford was in his office reviewing the next day's schedule when he heard Prince William's study door slam with tremendous force. The sound echoed throughout the entire east wing of the palace. Minutes later, he saw the prince walking rapidly through the corridors, his face flushed and his hair disheveled. The most shocking moment for the staff came around 7 o'clock, when they witnessed something none of them had ever seen before. The Duchess of Cambridge walked calmly through the main hallway, carrying a small suitcase and leading Prince Louis by the hand. Charlotte and George followed behind her, both looking confused and frightened. "Mummy, where are we going?" Charlotte asked in a voice loud enough for several staff members to hear. "To Grandmama and Grandpapa's house," Kate replied in a tone that was calm but somehow terrifying in its controlled composure. "We're going to stay there for a while." Mary approached the Duchess cautiously. "Your Royal Highness, is there anything I can do to help?" Kate looked at Mary with eyes that seemed to have aged years in a single afternoon. "Please make sure Prince William eats something tonight. And please don't let any reporters near the palace grounds." The request about reporters immediately told Mary that whatever had happened between the Duke and Duchess was serious enough to potentially become a public scandal. In all her years of service, Kate had never expressed concern about media attention to personal family matters. George, who at 9 years old was old enough to sense that something terrible was happening, tugged on his mother's coat. "Mummy, is Daddy coming with us?" Kate knelt down to her eldest son's level, and Mary watched as the Duchess struggled to maintain her composure. "Not tonight, darling. Daddy needs to stay here and take care of some important work matters." "But why do you look so sad?" George pressed. Mary saw Kate's eyes fill with tears for the first time that day. "Sometimes grown-ups have difficult conversations that make them feel sad, but you don't need to worry about that. You just need to know that Mummy and Daddy both love you very much." After the Duchess and children left for her parents' house in Bucklebury, the palace fell into an eerie silence. Prince William remained in his study with the door locked, refusing to answer when James knocked to discuss urgent matters requiring his attention. Around 9 o'clock, David Mitchell noticed a woman approaching the palace gates. She was wearing a blue coat and carrying a brown leather handbag, and she was clearly distressed. When security approached her, she identified herself as Sarah Mitchell and said she needed to speak with Prince William urgently about a personal matter. David had been briefed earlier about someone named Sarah making persistent phone calls, so he immediately contacted Prince William. The conversation was brief, and William instructed security to tell the woman that he could not see her and that she should not contact him again. Through the security monitors, David watched as Sarah Mitchell stood outside the palace gates for nearly an hour, clearly hoping that William would change his mind. Eventually, she walked away, but not before leaving an envelope with the security guards, addressed to Prince William. The envelope remained unopened on David's desk until the next morning, when Prince William finally emerged from his study looking like he hadn't slept at all. When David handed him the envelope, William's hand shook as he opened it. Mary, who was nearby arranging the morning newspapers, watched as Prince William read the letter. His face went completely white, and he had to sit down on a nearby bench to steady himself. "Your Royal Highness, are you all right?" Mary asked with concern. William looked up at her with eyes that seemed completely lost. "Mary, have you ever made a mistake so terrible that you don't know how to fix it?" Mary had never heard Prince William speak so vulnerably before. "Sir, I believe that most mistakes can be fixed with time, honesty, and genuine effort to make amends. What about mistakes that hurt innocent people? What about mistakes that change everything forever?" Mary realized that Prince William was asking for guidance about something far more serious than she had initially understood. "Sir, perhaps you should speak with someone who can provide proper counsel, your father, or a trusted advisor, or a spiritual counselor." "The person I would normally talk to about problems like this is Kate," William said quietly, "but she's the person I've hurt the most." Over the following days, the palace staff watched as the fairy tale marriage they had served began to unravel completely. Phone calls came constantly from lawyers, from royal advisors, and from family members trying to understand what was happening. James Crawford found himself in the impossible position of managing Prince William's official schedule while the prince was clearly in no condition to carry out his royal duties. Several important engagements had to be cancelled or postponed. With vague explanations about family matters requiring attention, the children's absence from the palace was explained publicly as an extended visit with their maternal grandparents, but the staff knew the truth was much more complicated. When Charlotte's ballet teacher called to confirm her next lesson, Madia had to explain that the children's schedule was temporarily uncertain. Most disturbing for the staff was watching Prince William transform from the confident, caring man they had known into someone who seemed completely broken. He barely ate, rarely slept, and spent most of his time either locked in his study or walking aimlessly through the palace gardens. Mary found herself in the unprecedented situation of managing a royal household where the primary residents were no longer speaking to each other. She had to coordinate between the Duchess, who was staying at her parents' house, and Prince William, who refused to leave the palace. The staff also had to deal with increased security concerns as rumors began circulating in the media about problems in the Cambridge marriage. David Mitchell implemented additional privacy measures and worked closely with the royal communications team to prevent any leaks about the true nature of the crisis. Through it all, the palace staff maintained their professionalism and discretion, but they could not hide their heartbreak at watching a family they had grown to love fall apart before their eyes. They had witnessed the beginning of William and Kate's fairy tale romance, and now they were watching its devastating end. The Middleton family home in Bucklebury had always been a place of warmth and comfort for Kate and the children, but tonight it felt different. Carol Middleton had raised her own children through difficult times, but watching her grandchildren process their parents' marital crisis was heartbreaking in a completely different way. These children lived in the public eye, where every family problem could become international news. "Can we call Daddy?" Louis asked, not understanding why. They had left his father behind at the palace. At 4 years old, Louis had never spent a night away from both parents, and his confusion was evident in his trembling voice. Kate looked at her youngest son and felt her heart break all over again. How do you explain to a 4-year-old that his father has been living a double life? How do you tell your children that the family they thought they knew was built on lies and deception? "We'll call Daddy tomorrow," Kate promised, though she had no idea what that conversation would entail. "Tonight, let's focus on being together and feeling safe." Michael Middleton, Kate's father, helped carry the children's bags upstairs while Kate and her mother had a whispered conversation in the kitchen. Carol could see that her daughter was in shock, moving through the motions of caring for her children while barely functioning herself. "Kate," Carol said gently, "what happened? This morning you seemed fine, and now you look like your world has collapsed." Kate looked at her mother, this woman who had always been her anchor and source of strength, and finally allowed herself to break down completely. Through tears and gasping sobs, she told her parents about Sarah's phone call, their meeting at the cafe, and the devastating photographs that revealed William's 2-year affair. "There's more," Kate whispered, glancing toward the stairs to make sure the children couldn't hear. "She's pregnant. William is going to have a baby with another woman." Carol felt her own world tilt at this news. She had watched Kate and William's relationship develop from their university days, had celebrated their engagement and wedding, and had welcomed William into their family as a son. The idea that he had betrayed Kate so completely was almost impossible to process. Meanwhile, upstairs, the children were struggling with their own confusion and fear. George lay in the twin bed in his mother's childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling and trying to understand what was happening to his family. He had heard his parents arguing before, but never like this. Never with the kind of anger and sadness that seemed to fill the entire palace. Charlotte was in the bed next to George, clutching her favorite stuffed animal and whispering questions that no one could answer. "George, why do Mummy and Daddy look so sad? Did we do something wrong?" "I don't think it's about us," George replied, though he wasn't entirely sure. "I think it's something between Mummy and Daddy." In the room next door, Prince Louis was crying softly in his travel crib, calling for his father. The little boy couldn't understand why his bedtime routine had been completely disrupted, why he was sleeping in a strange room, and why Daddy hadn't tucked him in like he did every night. Kate came upstairs to check on the children around 9 o'clock and found all three of them awake and distressed. She sat on George's bed and gathered Charlotte and Louis close to her, trying to provide comfort while her own heart was breaking. "I want to go home," Charlotte said quietly. "I want to sleep in my own bed and have Daddy read me a story." Kate felt tears welling up again. How do you tell your children that home might never feel the same again? That the bedtime stories and family routines they had always counted on might be changing forever? "Sometimes families go through difficult times," Kate said carefully. "Right. Now, Mummy and Daddy need some space to figure out how to solve a big problem. But that doesn't mean we love you any less." George, who had been quiet for several minutes, suddenly asked the question Kate had been dreading. "Mummy, does Daddy love someone else more than he loves us?" The innocence and pain in her 9-year-old son's voice nearly destroyed Kate's remaining composure. George had somehow sensed the truth about his father's divided loyalties, and Kate realized that her children were going to be more affected by this crisis than she had initially understood. "Daddy loves you very much," Kate said firmly. "Whatever problems Daddy and I are having, they have nothing to do with how much we love you children. You are the most important thing in both of our lives. But if Daddy loves us so much, why did he make you cry?" Charlotte asked with devastating directness. Kate realized that her children had been watching and absorbing much more than she had realized. They had seen her distress, heard the arguments, and witnessed the breakdown of their parents' relationship in ways that would affect them for years to come. The next morning brought new challenges as the children woke up in an unfamiliar environment, still confused about why they weren't at home with both parents. Louis kept asking for Daddy and pointing toward the door, expecting William to appear for their usual morning routine. George refused to eat breakfast, saying his stomach hurt. Charlotte was unusually clingy, following Kate everywhere and asking repeatedly when they would go home. The disruption to their normal routine was clearly causing them significant distress. Around 10 o'clock, William called Kate's phone. She answered reluctantly, stepping into her parents' garden for privacy. "Kate, please." William's voice was hoarse and desperate. "Let me come see the children. They need to know that I'm okay, and I need to see them. They're not ready to see you yet," Kate replied coldly. "They're confused and frightened, and I won't expose them to more emotional trauma right now." "They're my children too," William said, his voice breaking. "Please don't use them as weapons against me." Kate felt a surge of anger at his suggestion that she was deliberately keeping the children from him. "I'm not using them as weapons. I'm protecting them from a situation you created. If you wanted to consider their well-being, you should have thought about that before you started an affair." The conversation continued for several painful minutes, with William begging to see the children and Kate refusing until she could figure out how to handle the situation appropriately. Finally, they agreed that William could speak to each child briefly on the phone. George was the first to talk to his father, and Kate watched her son's face crumple when he heard William's voice. "Daddy, when are you coming to get us? I want to come home." William's voice was barely audible through the phone's speaker, but Kate could hear him crying as he tried to explain to his 9-year-old son why their family was falling apart. "I love you so much, George. Daddy made some big mistakes, and now I have to try to fix them." Charlotte's conversation with William was even more heartbreaking. She kept asking when he would come read her a bedtime story, not understanding that the simple routines she counted on might never be the same again. When it was Louis's turn, the 4-year-old simply held the phone and said, "Daddy, Daddy," over and over, not understanding why his father's voice was coming through a device instead of his father being there in person. After the phone calls, all three children were more upset than before. George retreated to his room and refused to come out for lunch. Charlotte had a complete meltdown, crying inconsolably about wanting to go home. Louis became clingy and refused to let Kate out of his sight. Kate realized that the phone calls, rather than comforting the children, had actually made them more aware that something was seriously wrong with their family. She began to understand that protecting her children from the truth about their father's betrayal was going to be much more complicated than she had initially thought. That evening, as Kate tucked the children into bed in her parents' house, Charlotte asked the question that would haunt Kate for months to come. "Mummy, if Daddy doesn't live with us anymore, does that mean our family is broken?" Kate looked at her 7-year-old daughter's tear-streaked face and realized that William's affair hadn't just destroyed their marriage, it had shattered their children's sense of security and belonging in ways that would take years to heal. Middleton watched her daughter arrive with 3 confused and frightened grandchildren, and immediately knew that something catastrophic had happened in her daughter's marriage. Kate's parents had always been supportive and discreet about their daughter's royal life, but they had never seen her look so completely devastated. When Kate walked through their front door carrying Prince Louis and leading Charlotte and George by the hand, Carol could see that her daughter was barely holding herself together. "Grandmama," Charlotte said as soon as she saw Carol, "why did we have to leave Daddy at the palace? He looked so sad when we said goodbye." Kate knelt down beside Charlotte, trying to find words that would comfort her daughter without revealing the devastating truth about what had just happened. Sometimes, grown-ups need time to think about important things. Sweetheart, Daddy needs some quiet time right now. George, who had been unusually quiet during the drive from London, finally spoke up. Mummy, are you and Daddy getting divorced like Henry's parents did? The question hit Kate like a physical blow. At 9 years old, George was old enough to recognize the signs of marital trouble, and his directness forced Kate to confront the reality that her children would inevitably be affected by whatever decision she and William made. I don't know, George, Kate answered honestly. Daddy and I need to have some very serious conversations about our future. But no matter what happens, we both love you children more than anything in the world. 3 days after the confrontation at Kensington Palace, Kate sat in her childhood bedroom at her parents' house, staring at her phone as it rang for the 20th time that morning. The caller ID showed William's name, but she couldn't bring herself to answer. Each conversation with her husband only seemed to make the situation more painful and complicated. The children had finally fallen into an uneasy routine at their grandparents' house, but Kate could see the emotional toll the upheaval was taking on them. George had become withdrawn and anxious, frequently asking questions about divorce and what would happen to their family. Charlotte was having nightmares and waking up crying for her father. Louis, at 4 years old, couldn't understand why their normal life had suddenly disappeared. Kate's phone buzzed with a text message from William. Please call me. We need to talk about the children's schedule and how to handle this situation. Publicly, the palace communications team is asking questions I don't know how to answer. The reality of their public roles was beginning to complicate their private crisis in ways Kate hadn't anticipated. As members of the royal family, their marriage wasn't just a personal matter. Their separation would affect the monarchy, the Commonwealth, and millions of people who had invested emotionally in their fairy tale romance. Carol Middleton knocked gently on Kate's bedroom door and entered carrying a cup of tea. Darling, you need to eat something. You haven't had a proper meal in 3 days. Kate accepted the tea gratefully but couldn't imagine eating anything. Her stomach had been in knots since learning about William's affair, and the thought of food made her feel nauseous. Mum, Kate said quietly, I don't know how to make decisions about our future when I can barely function day to day. Every choice I make will affect the children, the monarchy, and millions of people who look up to our family. You can only make decisions based on what's best for you and your children, Carol replied. You can't sacrifice your happiness and the children's well-being to maintain an image for other people. But it's not that simple, Kate said, feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of her situation. If I leave William, I'm not just ending a marriage, I'm potentially damaging an institution that's existed for over 1,000 years. Kate's phone rang again, and this time the caller ID showed Prince Charles's name. She knew she couldn't avoid talking to her father-in-law forever, especially since he would soon need to understand how William's personal crisis might affect his own role as heir to the throne. Catherine Charles's voice was gentle but concerned when she answered. I think we need to have a conversation about what's happening with you and William. Could you come to Highgrove this afternoon? I think it would be best if we discussed this situation privately before it becomes public knowledge. Kate agreed to meet with Charles, though she dreaded the conversation. She had always respected her father-in-law, but she wasn't sure how he would react to learning that his eldest son had been having an affair for 2 years. The drive to Highgrove House gave Kate time to think about what she wanted to say to Charles. She needed him to understand that William's betrayal wasn't just a personal matter between husband and wife. The affair had created a situation that could potentially damage the monarchy's reputation and credibility. Charles was waiting in his private study when Kate arrived, and she was struck by how much older and more tired he looked than when she had seen him just a month earlier. The stress of potentially becoming king while dealing with his son's marital crisis was clearly taking its toll. Catherine, Charles said, embracing her warmly, I want you to know that whatever has happened between you and William, you are still part of this family. The children are my grandchildren, and you are their mother. That will never change. Kate felt tears welling up at Charles's kindness. She had been so focused on her anger toward William that she hadn't considered how the affair might affect the relationship with the rest of the royal family. Thank you, Kate said quietly. I wasn't sure how you would feel about everything that's happened. Why don't you tell me exactly what has happened? Charles suggested. William called me yesterday and said there were serious problems in your marriage, but he wasn't specific about what those problems were. Kate took a deep breath and told Charles everything. Sarah's phone call, their meeting at the cafe, the photographs revealing William's 2-year affair, and the devastating news about Sarah's pregnancy. With each detail, she watched Charles's face grow more grave and concerned. A pregnant mistress, Charles said quietly when Kate finished her story. This is exactly the kind of scandal that could seriously damage the monarchy's reputation. Kate realized that Charles was thinking about the situation from an institutional perspective as well as a personal one. As heir to the throne, he had to consider how William's affair might affect public support for the royal family. Charles, Kate said carefully, I need you to understand that I didn't come here to ask you to fix this situation or to pressure William into ending his affair. I came here because you deserve to know the truth before you hear it from someone else. What are you planning to do? Charles asked. I don't know yet, Kate admitted. Part of me wants to divorce William immediately and take the children far away from all of this, but another part of me knows that such a drastic action would have consequences far beyond our personal situation. Charles nodded thoughtfully. Have you considered that there might be a middle path? A way to handle this situation that protects the children and the monarchy while still allowing you to maintain your dignity and self-respect. Kate looked at her father-in-law curiously. What kind of middle path? A formal separation rather than an immediate divorce. It would give you and William time and space to work through your personal issues while maintaining the stability that the children and the institution need. Kate considered this suggestion carefully. A separation would allow her to remove herself and the children from the immediate emotional trauma while avoiding the public spectacle of a royal divorce. But what about Sarah and the baby? Kate asked. How do we handle that situation? Charles's expression became even more serious. That's where William will need to make some very difficult choices. He cannot maintain a public role as future king while openly having a relationship with his pregnant mistress. Kate realized that Charles was essentially telling her that William would have to choose between his royal duties and his personal happiness. It was a choice that had been forced on members of the royal family for generations. What if he chooses Sarah? Kate asked. Then he would have to abdicate his position in the line of succession. Charles replied quietly. George would become heir after me, with you serving as regent until he comes of age. The magnitude of this possibility hit Kate like a physical blow. William might actually give up his birthright for another woman, leaving their 9-year-old son to carry the burden of future kingship. Later that evening, Kate returned to her parents' house with a new understanding of the impossible choices facing her family. She found the children in the living room with their grandfather, playing a board game that seemed to provide temporary distraction from their family crisis. "Mummy," Charlotte said, running to hug Kate as soon as she walked through the door. "Grandpapa said we might be able to go back to London soon. Is that true?" Kate looked at her daughter's hopeful face and realized that the children needed some sense of normalcy and routine, regardless of what was happening between their parents. "We'll see, sweetheart," Kate said carefully. "There are still some grown-up things that Mummy and Daddy need to figure out first." That night, as Kate tucked the children into bed, George asked the question she had been dreading. "Mummy, if you and Daddy get divorced, will I still have to be king someday?" Kate looked at her 9-year-old son, who was already beginning to understand the weight of his royal destiny, and realized that William's affair had potentially changed not just their family's future, but the future of the British monarchy itself. "I don't know, George," she answered honestly. "But whatever happens, you don't need to worry about being king for many, many years. Right now, you just need to focus on being a little boy." As Kate turned off the lights and prepared for another sleepless night, she knew that the decisions she made in the coming days would affect not just her own future, but the futures of her children, the royal family, and the millions of people around the world who looked to the monarchy for stability and continuity. The phone call that had started this crisis had lasted only minutes, but its consequences would reshape their. It lives forever.